right. Well, good morning, or no, excuse me, good afternoon, and it's been a good day. So we're really glad that you're here. Hopefully you've had a chance to visit some of our displays and our folks in the auditorium space and the other side for History Hootenanny in a very kind of resource-wise, and museums and stories and resources that we have available there. Seeing the baseball exhibit, our other programs and activities in the classroom. Tennessee Theater, they're having a screening right now of one of the films, and they'll be having others showing. Another showing at 4 with Angels in the Outfield. So we have some incredible partners with the Historic House Museums, and so what a great day it has been. But we're glad that you all are here for this session of our mini lectures that we are kind of integrating into our History Hootenanny format. And we've been really pleased to have the speakers that we've had so far today. And we also welcome Ann Hatfield to present for us now. Ann is the founder of the Society of Sidesaddle Storytellers. They are a Knoxville-based living history group who love horses, fashion, and history. They do programs and riding demonstrations that illustrate the progression of riding a side, showing different costumes and portrayals of famous women equestrians like Queen Elizabeth I, Annie Oakley, and Queen Victoria. Their goal is to keep the tradition and elegance of Sidesaddle alive for many generations to come. So we welcome you and thank you for being with us today.
All right, well, hi everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I know we've spoken to all of you, so I do really appreciate you coming back to support us today. And of course, thank you for supporting the East Tennessee History Museum. This is such a wonderful event, and we're so excited to be included in it this year. Like she said, my name is Ann Hatfield, and we're here with the Society of Sidesaddle Storytellers. We are a living history group and do riding demonstrations. And helping out today, I have Miss Wendy here, who's going to talk a little bit later about Sidesaddle racing. And then Miss Catherine is also going to help us out and be a fashion model for us today and show you how to sit on the Sidesaddle. So just a little bit of a rundown of what we're going to talk about. First, I'll start out with the kind of general history of the Sidesaddle, and I'll talk about how it progressed and changed throughout time. And we'll discuss a few of the more notable women who rode this way. And then we'll finish it out with talking about some of the more athletic disciplines that people are doing in modern day times with the Sidesaddle. And we are a small group, so feel free to ask any questions if you guys have any questions throughout the program. And thank you anyone online who's listening. We appreciate you being out there. All right, so to address the elephant in the room, is horseback riding a sport? So, if you go to Gatlinburg and you're doing a nose-to-tail trail ride with your family and you don't even have to steer your horse, maybe not quite so much of a sport, but we're talking today about different disciplines of horseback riding that include, polo, cross-country, dressage, show jumping. There's a lot of different things out there that include a lot of athletic coordination and skill and balance, all while navigating different courses and while navigating being around other animals as well. And of course, it's a team sport. It's not just about you, it's about the connection with your animal as well. And you're on a giant creature that is huge and could kill you if they wanted to. So you really do have to have, that partnership and those communication skills with your animal. And if you're interested, they first included horseback riding as a sport in the Olympics all the way back in 1912. So why Sidesaddle? Now, women have actually been riding this way for almost 1,000 years. And, we kind of associate it more with the Victorian age because, we see all these pictures of women out fox hunting in side saddles. But, women have actually been doing this since the medieval times. And, there's a million different incredible women throughout history who have done, really amazing things on the back of a horse. Women who broke societal norms, and they showed their bravery and their courage and their skill. All while doing this, in a side saddle, while wearing beautiful dresses and looking elegant at the same time. So our job and our goal as a group is to try to bring awareness to this sport and just show people how wonderful and cool it is, and that we want to just let people know that this is a tradition that's worth keeping alive for years to come. So moving on to the history of side saddle, it can be traced as far back as the 1200s, although people might have been riding side saddle in Greek and Roman times as well, but we first start seeing a lot of pictures of this pop up in medieval documents. So women in medieval times could be seen sitting on a horse behind a man. This was called sitting on a pillion, which was basically just a pillow behind the man's saddle on a horse. So the man would have been doing the steering and the work, and the woman would just sit there and look pretty. But this wasn't the most practical thing in the world to have to share a horse, with two people. So eventually they decided they would come up with this side saddle contraption. And they had their reasons for this because they thought if a woman sat on a horse and wrapped her legs around that horse, that it would basically jostle her insides and it would make her lose the ability to have children, which obviously we know today is not true, but that's just what they thought back then. So the men said that it was probably going to be more practical to make their women ride in this new side saddle contraption, and that would keep them pure and ladylike and proper. But this first side saddle basically kind of just looked like a chair that was sideways on the back of a horse. And a woman would sit in it facing the left, but she would not be steering her horse, and she really just had to sit there and look pretty and be in a beautiful dress. She would have had a groom on the ground leading her at a walk, or a horse would have walked in front of her and led her that way. But the first woman that we have known evidence of riding in a side saddle, also called riding aside, was Anna Bohemia all the way back in 1382. And basically this young woman, she was 15 years old, and she was being sent off hundreds of miles away from home to go marry King Richard II of England. And this is a man that she had never met, so she had to be brave and had to go off and do her part to save her country. And she was meant to ride in this side saddle because they wanted to ensure that she could have children by the time she got there. But she was the first one that we had pictures and historical text of riding aside. So we like to remember her because she, must have been a very courageous young woman to be 15, to leave her home and her family forever to go marry King Richard. But it was actually said that the marriage worked out really well for her and that he was a loving and devoted husband and that they were rarely apart. So at least we have some solace that it did work out well. But eventually, as time goes on, we decide that it's not the most practical thing to have to sit there and face sideways and only be able to walk in the side saddle. So eventually some improvements are made to the saddle. And in the 1500s, Catherine de' Medici decides that she can put a horn on this saddle, like this one down here at the bottom. And basically, if a woman wrapped her leg around this horn, it would give her the ability to walk and do some trotting, and she could canter as well a little bit. So she could canter kind of in a straight line or an open field, but she wasn't going to be doing any jumping at this time because there wasn't really anything to hold her super securely in place. But it definitely would have required a lot of leg strength to wrap your leg around that horn and keep you on that saddle. But the side saddles at this time were pretty much just for the aristocratic class and for royalty. And people used it as a power play. So Queen Elizabeth II over on the side, she loved to ride in her side saddle because she was very into fashion. And she loved horses as well. So she would ride side saddle through royal processions and visits throughout towns. And this was her way to show off to her people, look at my wealth and look at my beautiful dresses and look at my gorgeous horse. But Queen Elizabeth II, first, was also known for being a really talented equestrian, and she rode in different ways. So she rode astride with legs on both sides of the horse as well. And she was kind of known for breaking societal norms because she chose to never marry. So she held the throne for 45 years by herself as a woman. She also led her men into battle on multiple occasions by horseback. She would have done this in a normal saddle like a man, but she would have worn a full suit of armor, we think. So she was a really incredible woman. But we know that she had covers that would go over her side saddles that were lined with gold and velvet. So she definitely loved to show off her skills and her wealth. So the side saddle stays about the same until the 1800s. So it just kind of has that one horn on there. Eventually, they come up with this idea that if they add a second horn called the leaping horn, this would allow women the ability to go a little bit faster in this saddle. So you can see the horns here. This is your leaping horn. This is your leaping horn. And basically, this gave the ability to do anything that you wanted in that saddle. Anything a man could do, a woman could now do in the side saddle. So it had kind of been seen as a form of oppression, being forced to ride side saddle. Women saw it as this thing that men were making them do for hundreds of years. They had to conform to society, they had to look ladylike and pure and proper. But adding that leaping horn on there gave them the ability to go out and show, hey, we can do any of these sports that the men can do. We can fox hunt, we can race, we can jump things, and we're gonna look prettier than anyone else while doing it. And those horns made it extremely difficult to fall off. So you would probably think, you're going to fall out of the side saddle. It looks really unstable. But it's actually quite the opposite. Those horns hold you very securely in place. So you can go out and do, anything that you wanted. So it was extremely empowering for these women. And this would have been a time in society when women didn't have a lot of say over many aspects in their lives because their husbands, their fathers would have been making the decisions for them. So by riding in this side saddle, it gave them the ability to say, I have the funds to purchase this expensive saddle, I have the beautiful outfit to go with it, and I have the skills to ride in it as well. So eventually we come up with the safety apron. After women are doing a lot more risky things in these side saddles, we're finding that oftentimes it's not the most practical thing in the world to be jumping and having really long skirts because sometimes you get pulled off by your skirt. So women oftentimes would get dragged and sometimes injured or dragged to death because of these long, luxurious dresses that they were wearing. So not very practical. So we came up with this thing called the safety apron. So Ms. Catherine is going to come up and be my model for me. So she is wearing a safety apron, and you can see on the back side it actually doesn't have anything back there. So it pops right open, and this would keep a woman from getting hung up by their skirts. So I'll help her get on. And so you would be able to sit there and be, elegant and ladylike and pretty, but also practical in that you're hopefully not going to get yanked off of your horse by your skirts. All right, thank you, Catherine. Lovely model. And the safety apron was also in combination with the safety stirrup, which also came about in the 1870s. So this stirrup here, if you yank on it hard enough, it should just pull right out. So this in combination with the safety apron ended up saving a lot of women's lives.
What years did that come about?
Both of them were in the 1870s. So it's kind of like ballet in that, you're supposed to look pretty while doing this, but it's also a sport that requires a lot of athleticism as well. So there's a lot of abdominal muscles involved, arm strength, lower back strength, leg strength, coordination, and communication with your horse. So moving on to a few women that you all should know. Annie Oakley is one of my favorites, but she was well known for being a very talented marksman in the late 1800s. And she toured the country with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, but was also invited by Queen Victoria to do a grand tour of Europe. And not only was she well known for being a marksman, but she also was a really talented equestrian as well. And she kind of was with this rough and tumble group of Western people performing in these shows. And, at halftime, they'd be smoking cigarettes or drinking, but she could actually be found doing needlepoint or crocheting in her tent during break. So she liked to remain a modest and feminine woman. But because of this, she liked to ride in her side saddle because I think, touring and being out in the Western U.S., this gave her something to help keep, stability in her life. She wanted to still look pretty and proper, even though she was out there kind of in this tough and dirty place. But Annie Oakley was really incredible because, not only was she a talented sharpshooter and horseback rider, but she was very outspoken as well. And she was a huge advocate for women in sports. She said it was really healthy for women to get out and get exercise. and she was also an advocate for helping the poor and for public education. So she's someone that's really impressive that I think a lot of people have heard about, but maybe didn't know quite just how amazing she was. Sybil Ludington is someone that probably most people haven't heard of, but she is actually kind of seen as the female Paul Revere. So she was a 15-year-old girl who basically did exactly what Paul Revere did. Her father was a colonel in the Continental Army in 1777, and the local British troops had all gone home for the planting season, or the local militiamen. And then they ended up finding that the British troops were headed towards them, and they were going to raid the Continental Army supply depot. And because they didn't have phones back then or a fast way to communicate, someone had to physically ride door to door and to go rally all of the local militiamen. And brave young Sybil, at 15 years old, volunteered to be that person to go and rally the troops. So she set off late in the evening on her trusted horse Star, and she rode almost 40 miles that night in the pouring rain, in the pitch black of night, and she would bang a stick on her neighbors' doors and yell, "The British are burning Danbury." And so by morning, about 400 men had made it to them, and they were able to halt the advancing British troops. And she even went on to be thanked personally by General George Washington himself. So she was a really incredible young woman that definitely should get more attention than she does. Queen Elizabeth II, this is a woman probably everyone is familiar with, lifelong equestrian and lover of horses, but she could be seen every year riding Sidesaddle in the Trooping of the Colors ceremony. And she had been gifted a horse named Burmese from the Canadian Mounted Police back in 1969, and this became her favorite horse. And she actually rode Burmese for 18 years in this parade every year. And at this time, this is with the invention of the television, so she was getting a lot of eyes on her, and people saw how wonderful she was. And this actually inspired a whole new generation of women to want to ride Sidesaddle. But eventually, her horse did retire, which, you can imagine this is the best retirement that a horse could hope for. And the Queen was really sad about it and decided she never wanted to ride in that parade again. So she chose to inspect the troops by carriage for the remainder of her life. So again, a really inspiring woman that we love to see in the Sidesaddle world. And here in Tennessee, we have a couple interesting women as well. So if you've been to the Ramsey House, Mary Ramsey Lemon Woods, she was born here in Knoxville, and she ended up migrating west on the Oregon Trail. And she rode a Sidesaddle the whole way. And she ended up being a midwife, and she delivered babies all the way from Knoxville, all over the Oregon Territory. And they called her the Queen Mother of Oregon. So she was a really interesting woman, and she ended up being, they think, the oldest woman to die. They said that she was 120 when she passed away, but they think, the census at that time was maybe inaccurate, but still, she was very, very old when she passed away. But there's newspaper articles about her being 120 years old, they think, when she passed away. And lastly, here in Tennessee, we have the Sidesaddle Soldiers of Ray County. This was an all-female cavalry unit of women who rode Sidesaddles, and they provided aid to their husbands and their boyfriends in the Civil War. So they would take their horses and load them up with food and clothing and supplies, and they would go out to the Confederate troops and help their men. And it's actually believed that some of these women ended up becoming spies, and some were captured by Union troops. So there's a lot of very interesting stories there, but these women were certainly very brave and, were doing their part to help their husbands in the war. So moving on to women's rights. In the Victorian and Edwardian age, women are finally demanding to be considered equals to men. At this time, they were actually kind of using the Sidesaddle as the symbol as oppression. So women suffragettes were saying, women have had to conform to society for hundreds of years. They had to ride in this Sidesaddle, and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to ride in a stride saddle, like a man can. So here on the bottom, this is Inez Milholland. She's a very famous suffragette, and she led basically a political revolution by horseback. And she traveled all across the US and led tens of thousands of women in marches in Washington, D.C. and New York City. And, basically she went out there and just said, we can do anything a man could do, and we're going to ride in this astride saddle, and we don't want side saddles anymore. So it was said that women bravely rode into the voting booth as second-class citizens on a side saddle, and then they galloped out astride. So basically, women's rights, after they got the right to vote in 1920, this pretty much led to the downfall of the side saddle, which is sad for us, but wonderful for them that they were able to speak up for themselves and help to lead to the rights that we have today. So eventually, after the 20s, aristocrats were still kind of continuing to ride side saddle here and there. And, after the World Wars, if you still had money at the time that the wars had ended, you wanted people to know that you still had money. So some women still would continue to ride side saddle out in public. But like I mentioned earlier, with the invention of the television, people saw Queen Elizabeth out there riding side saddle. And there were various shows and movies that displayed side saddle as well. The Flambards is a show about British aristocracy, and that came out in the late 70s and went through the 80s and was very popular and illustrated a lot of side saddle riding. And Downton Abbey, of course, was also a show that showed side saddle as well. So moving on to modern day, there's a lot of different disciplines of riding side saddle. Basically anything that you can do in a normal saddle, you can do in a side saddle as well. That means, you can do mounted shooting, you can do working equitation, which is the one up in the top in the middle, which requires a lot of coordination. You're going through different obstacles with your horse. People do side saddle races, which we're going to talk about in a second. You can do dressage, show jumping, pretty much anything that you want. And, of course, it's a team sport. You're not just worrying about yourself, you're worrying about your giant horse as well. So if you know anything about horses, if you're on a well-trained horse, you should be steering first with your legs. So the way that you're sitting on your horse, if you use your legs, you can tap them, and that tells them to go left and right. And then secondly, your hands are a secondary aid. So in a side saddle, you only have one leg, so you can't steer the most efficiently. So women will carry a crop or a whip in their right hand, and that's not to hurt the horse, it's just to help act as a fake leg, basically, and that's to help steer your horse. But if you're out trail riding, maybe you don't have to be quite so accurate with your steering, but if you're doing dressage or show jumping that does require accuracy, it's really incredible to see what women are able to do in these side saddles, because you basically have to learn how to communicate effectively with your horse. And every horse is different too, so what works for one horse may not work for another horse. So it really illustrates how strong the partnership is between the horse and the rider, which I think is really beautiful. Just wanted to throw this in here because this is incredible. The highest side saddle jump is achieved by Susan Oakes of Ireland back in 2013. So she set it at 6 feet 8 inches, which is huge and terrifying. But previously it had been held by Esther Stantz, who set it back in 1915. And Esther held it for almost 100 years, so pretty incredible. I guess she was the only one who really had the guts to do it. Everyone else said she was crazy until this one came along. And I'm pretty sure that she actually ended up beating her own record a couple years later. But you will not see me out there attempting that. And then today we also have a couple interesting races that take place here in the US and in Europe as well. But one of the more well-known ones is the Calgary Stampede race. And this one is huge. It's in front of a giant arena. So they do a huge rodeo up there every single year. And this is in front of many thousands of people. And they wear all sorts of different outfits. So they like to illustrate, Western riding, traditional riding from like the 1800s attire that you would wear, and then more modern side saddle habits as well. So they're pretty incredible, and they're really fast and wear beautiful outfits. And I'm going to bring up a guest for a second, and Miss Wendy here has actually ridden in a race herself. So she's just going to talk to you briefly about her experience in a side saddle race.
Hi, I'm Wendy Pruden, and I live down in Georgia, just north of Macon. And I was invited to join the Aiken Ladies Aside in their annual race at the Aiken Trials. And I'm a little different in that I ride a very large Clydesdale stallion. So we are not very fast, but they still let us take part because this really is an exhibition race. We are mostly getting out, kind of like today, to spread the word about Sidesaddle and to show that we can get out there and go fast and have fun and be safe. We are very adamant that everybody is checked over for their safety to make sure our equipment is all very up to date and ready to go, and all of our horses are safe in a group. And so we do go out on the track and race from between a mile and a mile and a quarter. In past years, they have done as much as a mile and a half. But we do a walking start, which is basically we all line up together. We start moving together at a walk. At a certain point, we will progress to a trot, and then we will take off at a canter and gallop to our heart's content. We just compete for the fun of it and have a good time. It's done very similar to the way the Calgary race is done. And I believe theirs is also similar in that it's done for just the glory of competing and showing off the sport and getting out there. Yeah. So we have taken part 2 years in a row now, and I'm pretty sure we will go back as many times as we are able, and I'm hoping that Anne will be joining us next year.
Thank you, Wendy. And hopefully this little video will work. Kind of terrifying, kind of amazing. So pretty incredible. So to wrap things up, after almost 1,000 years of women riding in a side saddle, we think that this is something that is still worth, sharing and preserving. It's an empowering art form and a style of riding that really just puts us in the shoes of all these incredible women who came before us. And it takes a lot of muscle and skill, all while you're supposed to be looking polished and elegant and poised while doing it. And, I think we want to preserve this sport, not just for the skill that it takes to ride this way, but to also honor all of the hundreds of years of stories that go with it. So thank you guys again for being such a wonderful group and for coming out to support us. We do have programs here in Knoxville from time to time. I think I told some of you all that the Mabry Hasten House had us out earlier this year. So please follow us on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with anything that we may have going on. But again, thank you guys so much, and we'll take any questions that you guys may have for us. Thank you.
So there is one stirrup.
Yep, just
Okay.
one.
I heard you say detached, and I'm looking at this black one, and I don't see a stirrup.
Not one on
And
that
I was
one.
going, how do you get on? Do you have a box that you step up to get, but I see you've got a.
Yeah, and that's a great
stirrup or
question
stirrup.
too. So this stirrup is a lot higher up than a normal saddle because you have to be able to have the leverage to push up against this horn. So it's really short, and especially if you're getting on a Clydesdale, you are not going to be able to hop on from the ground. So you have to have a mounting block or a step ladder to hop up on. But of course, back in the day, women wanted to look, elegant while doing this, and you didn't want to show your ankles to people. So they oftentimes would have mounted from their stable in privacy so that people weren't seeing too much of their legs exposed. But a man could also help, to lift them up into the saddle. But you definitely, after doing that a while, hopefully you would get pretty good at doing that and not showing too much of your legs while doing it.
And there's no small, medium, and large horns, are there? I mean, we've got itty bitty ladies and larger.
So the side saddle, they can come in different shapes and sizes. And you do want to find one that fits you and the horse. Because if it doesn't fit you, you're not going to be able to ride in an even and balanced way on your horse. Like this one, this is a really cheaply made side saddle from India. Not suitable to actually ever go on a horse. This is something that was donated to me just for educational purposes, but it's got these really cheap horns on here that are small and would probably be pretty uncomfortable for your legs. But this is really designed, it's like the Ferrari sports car of side saddles. This is a Mayhew saddle from 1920, fully restored. And this is what, you know, the British aristocracy would have been out fox hunting in and going fast. So this is designed to be really comfortable and to cradle your leg and hold you on there so that hopefully it wouldn't be putting too much, you know, taxing on your legs. But it's actually a lot more comfortable than you would think, for sure.
And talk about how the queen adjusts your fit.
Yeah, so this is a sock, but this acts as a queen is what it's called. But this helps to kind of push your leg over so it keeps you really nice and straight on your horse, because if you start to move to the side, that's going to throw your horse off balance. So you can pad this up and that'll push you and keep you nice and straight and square on your horse.
They were just leather, yeah, that's slick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So if a horse has been ridden astride for 4 or 5 years, and then someone throws a side saddle on and jumps on it, how long does it take the horse to recognize the different signals? And the
Yeah, great
change?
question. So it's going to be different with every horse, for sure. My horse, I think, was kind of confused at first. I think he
Yeah.
thought I was just crazy. He said, "What are you doing up there, Mom?" But he took, you know, extra care and attention to make sure I wasn't going to fall off. I think he recognized it was different, for sure. But every horse is different, and you want to make sure that you're riding side saddle on a horse that, one, is safe, a horse that you know doesn't have the tendency to buck or bolt or rear, because you are so secure on there that it's hard to make an emergency dismount. So, you know, some horses will take to it really quickly, and then some, they may not like the girth system because they have a strap that goes across the back here, so it kind of goes sideways and around the horse. So some horses just don't like that feeling, and they may never take to it. But every horse is different, but hopefully if you have a horse that is a decently educated horse and has a good attitude, they should take to it reasonably well. Did your horses have kind of the same
I
experience?
haven't had anybody who's been trained under saddle who has not taken the side saddle. The other thing is you don't start a horse side saddle until they're at least 6, because it can be a little bit more work on their spine if the rider is slightly unbalanced. So by that time, my horses have had usually a couple years under saddle, and so they're pretty well adjusted to everything. So mine have all picked it up within a month or 2, you know, of occasional riding, yeah.
And, you know, as long as your saddle fits your horse well, and as long as you're riding properly and staying balanced, you know, it should not be hurting the horse in any way.
No, not
Yeah.
You might think that it would make a horse sore, but this may get a bad rep because, you know, back in the day, these saddles were very expensive. So oftentimes a woman would have just thrown the same saddle on whatever horse she had. So if she was out fox hunting for 6 or 7 hours with a saddle that didn't fit her horse, it definitely could make her horse sore for sure. But of course, you know, today we know a lot more about welfare and about saddle fit, and, you know, our horse's health is our #1 priority. So we want to make sure that they're enjoying the sport just as much as we are. And you can definitely tell if a horse likes what they're doing or not. So they tell you pretty quickly if they like it.
So in your list of sports, the one thing I didn't notice is barrel racing, and I started, it seems like from my memory, they go around the left side and then they go around the right side.
Yeah.
So that probably wouldn't work out.
You can still barrel race in a Western side saddle, or I mean an English one too. It's definitely, like, it is weird because you are
Right.
on the left. It's weird, but you can do it for sure.
Okay.
All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up. So thank you guys again for being such a wonderful group, and please follow us on Facebook. We'd love to keep up and connect with you guys. We really appreciate you all, and please enjoy the rest of the History Festival today.
Great presentation.